now is Senator Marco Rubio of Florida. He serves on the Foreign Relations and Select Intelligence Committees. Senator, good morning.
Good morning.
What's your position on what happened last night?
It was the right move. First of all, it was legal. It was in furtherance of both enforcing an agreement that the United States and Russia were a party to for the removal of chemical weapons. It was in furtherance of the treaty that they signed. It was in furtherance of international law that says that you cannot use chemical weapons against anyone, not to mention innocent civilians. It was in furtherance of the UN Security Council resolution. It was also in our national interest. There are hundreds of American troops now in the region and in Syria who could be threatened by sarin gas. If Assad is willing to use that gas against civilians, why would he not be willing to use it against Americans? And so it was important, and it was proportional, and it was targeted, but it was not just symbolic. He specifically targeted and degraded, significantly degraded, a key military installation which has been used in the past, and I believe would have been used in the future for chemical attacks.
So if the president wants to launch more missile strikes, does he need to go to Congress?
It depends on the circumstances. If it is in response to an exigent circumstance or an immediate threat to our national interest, then I don't believe the president needs to come before Congress. As the commander-in-chief, he has the right to pursue that. It's been the position of every president before him as well, and I agree with that. If he wants to engage in a broader conflict, then I certainly think he needs to come to Congress, and it would behoove him to do so because Congress has to pay for it. We have to appropriate the money for that. But that's not where we are right now. But as of last night, just talking about that one instance alone, what he did was the right thing.
And where are we right now? What do you think happens next?
Well, what's interesting here is I do believe that through the National Security Council, they've been working on a strategic plan for Syria. And obviously, you can't control the timing of these crises, and they got ahead of the planning. I do believe now that that work will continue, but with some new dynamics built in, including what I hope is the growing realization that as long as Bashar al-Assad is in Syria and in control, not only will he continue to commit crimes, but you're going to have radical groups. There will be radical Sunni jihadists in Syria as long as Assad is in power. Even if you destroy ISIS, they're already being replaced by the al-Qaeda-linked al-Nusra groups. And so the removal of Assad is in furtherance of our other goal, which is to defeat and not allow these radical jihadist groups to continue to grow.
Okay, so you're calling for Assad to be removed. If the president comes to Congress and says that he's on board with that plan, does Congress give him the authority?
Well, again, it depends on what plan is in place. I don't believe that will merely be accomplished solely through a military component. I think we have allies in the region that have an interest in this as well. That includes Turkey, who cares deeply about northern Syria and what's happening there. Our Jordanians, who care about what's happening in the south. Our Sunni allies at the UAE and Saudi Arabia, who care about Iran's influence in the region. But you have to be able to show that there is a capable group of Sunnis, not just capable on the battlefield, but also capable of governance of significant portions of the country in a way that protects the rights of the Sunni majority in Syria. And that's what I hope, that's the one area where I hope we'll continue to invest in, because I think that's a critical component of a long-term solution.
I guess my point is that the U.S. and the world community has been watching what Assad's atrocities for 7 years, and there hasn't seemed to be the appetite in Congress here to really stop him or do much. And I'm wondering if you think that something has shifted, has something changed, where now Congress has a different stomach for this?
Well, you know, I talked about that 48 hours ago. I said we've grown kind of desensitized to these horrifying crimes and these horrifying attacks in the past. I worry that we've grown desensitized. Hopefully that has changed. In 2011, when this all began, I was very clear that I really thought we needed to empower non-jihadist Sunnis on the ground, and that if we didn't, that space that was being created by this conflict would be filled by foreign fighters. That's what's happened. So our options are a little bit more difficult now than they were 5, 6, 7 years ago, but nevertheless, it's sooner, rather to do it later than never at all. It's more difficult. This is not an easy thing, but it's a necessary thing, because as long as Assad is in power, as long as instability is in Syria, you will have a radical jihadist group to fill that void.
You know, you said something earlier this week that got some attention. You basically suggested, correct me if I'm wrong, that the rhetoric of Secretary of State Tillerson as well as Ambassador Nikki Haley, where they both said that getting rid of Assad was not a top U.S. priority, and you suggested that that somehow then gave Assad perhaps cover or at least impunity to then launch that chemical attack on his own people. That the timing of that statement and what he did was connected. And now we see, you know, just 2 days later, this attack on Assad's airbase. Do you draw a straight line between those first comments of Tillerson and Haley to where we are today?
Well, and I don't believe that that was their intention, but I don't believe it was coincidental. And here's why. Like anybody else, Assad sits there and says, here's the price for doing this, here's the benefit for doing this. And I think for far too long, he has said to himself, the price of these attacks, whether it's barrel bombing innocents or using sarin gas, is I'll get some nasty letter from the UN or bad press in the global market. But the benefits are I get to defeat my opponents, even if I have to kill a bunch of innocent people in the process. Hopefully that cost-benefit analysis will have shifted a little bit after last night.
You've been focused on Syria and what's going on there in Assad for a long time. What do you think his next move is?
I'm sorry, Assad?
Assad's.
Well, look, Assad is fighting for survival, and I think he's willing to go as far as possible to hold on to power. He knows that if he is removed from power, he's going to be before the Hague for war crimes or dead. And so obviously that's what we're dealing with, a very desperate individual. The Russians care about having a presence. It's their largest military presence in the world outside of Russia. The Iranians care about having a sphere of influence. Hezbollah cares about having a supply line so they can get rocket technology from Iran into southern Lebanon. Everybody has a different interest in there. Our interest is to make sure that Syria is not an ungoverned space where jihadists can go and plot to attack Americans. That's our interest. That's our deep national security interest. And that's what we should be pursuing. What Assad is going to do next, I'm not sure, other than continue to murder people if he can get away with it. And so hopefully what he's doing next is he's deeply worried about losing power and being ousted and having to stand trial for war crimes.
Do you believe there's an international coalition that would now, starting today, help the U.S. get rid of Assad?
Well, we're about to find out, but I can tell you that international coalition will not happen without strong American leadership. We can't solve all the world's problems, but there are very few problems in the world that can be solved without America. And I do believe that if America is willing to lead with a combination of a military and a diplomatic solution to this problem, then I believe we will have willing nations, including the Turks, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, the Jordanians, perhaps even Egypt, and our allies, of course, in Europe.
And Senator, what do you think this does for U.S.-Russian relations? Do you think that starting today that we will hear different rhetoric than we've heard heretofore coming out of the State Department and the White House?
Well, I don't know. We'll see. I think clearly the Russians are complicit in these war crimes. If they were at that facility and they had personnel stationed at that air base, they had to have known that there was sarin gas being loaded onto those planes. The Russians know that Assad has sarin gas. They know that he used it. They cover for him in international forums. You know, one of the things is we need to stop worrying so much about what Russia's going to think or what Russia's going to do. They should be worried about us. And perhaps now, for the first time in quite a while, I think they are.
Senator, you ran for president. Obviously, if you were president today, what would you do today?
Well, first of all, I agree with the decision the president made last night. I'm not the president, and so I did not have before me all of the strike packages that we proposed to him. Obviously, I would have made different decisions if I was president when President Obama was president, but I'm not the president. And so I don't suppose to put myself in that position because he's got more information about this than I do. Suffice it to say that I support what he did last night, and I do believe the president must now focus on a strategy that accomplishes the dual goals of removing Assad and replacing him with something more stable, and in the process also defeating ISIS and Al-Qaeda and any other radical element in Syria.
Senator Marco Rubio, thanks so much for taking time
you.
on this busy morning to talk to us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Chris.
And of course, how Assad reacts and how Russia reacts is very important.